Good morning, everyone. I'm Roxanne Liu, Programs Director at Makati Business Club. Just a few reminders before we begin. For security reasons, we only send meeting links to registrants. As a courtesy to other attendees and to help us recognize you if you have a question, please make sure your photo or video has your first and last name. If you are not using a Microsoft account, you can edit your display name as you come into the webinar. To avoid disruption and ensure connection stability, please keep your microphones and cameras off until the Q&A session. We encourage you to send in your questions early, even while the presentation is going on. You may send in your questions by typing them in the chat box. When we call on you for your question, we will turn your microphone on. Please state your name and organization before asking your question. Lastly, today's session is being recorded. We may use all or part of it in our platforms or publications. Before we begin, allow us to share a video from our partner, Microsoft.
Can we try that again? Michelle?
Yeah. Felix, can we play it again with audio, please? Thank you.
How do we empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more?
It starts with one.
One employee.
One developer.
One organization.
From one employee to a team collaborating with another team.
From one organization to their customers, to their customers' customers.
Helping local communities, creating jobs, increasing productivity for the global economy.
Our society.
Our world.
That's the impact.
That's the impact.
That's the impact each of us can have.
That's our opportunity.
100,000 plus employees.
75 million organizations.
7 billion people on the planet.
100 to 75 to 7.
To make every small business more productive.
To make every large business more competitive.
To make nonprofits more effective.
To make government institutions more responsive.
To expand access to education.
To improve healthcare outcomes. And to amplify human ingenuity.
When we empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, we empower the world.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the 5th session of our Leading in Extraordinary Times series with Microsoft. This is also our last membership event for 2020 for MBC. Thank you for your support in this challenging year. We are pleased to be joined by our board member, Itos Cruz, who will be delivering the opening remarks today. We are ending the year with our partner, Microsoft, represented by Andres Ortola, Country General Manager for the Philippines. He will be sharing his leadership insights and experiences with the topic, Purpose-Driven Innovation. We organized this series not just so you could hear from a top leader, but so that you could talk with him and your colleagues who are gathered here today. So please type in your questions early, even while Andres is still speaking. Before we begin, may I invite our trustee, SGV's former chairman and managing partner, Itos Cruz, for the opening remarks. Itos?
Thank you, Coco. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 5th installment of our Leading in Extraordinary Times series. I also wish to welcome Andres Ortola, our speaker today, and thank him in advance for sharing his insights. We started this series in August because we wanted to give our members the opportunity to hear and talk about the challenges we are all facing. 8 months into the pandemic, and with a vaccine on the way, we may now be able to start processing our lessons learned. At the start of the crisis, COVID-19 forced governments and businesses to ask how they can meet the changing needs of stakeholders. In the previous sessions, we heard how leaders answered this question. Jasa talked about the need for speed, scale, and stamina, which Al Panlilio says needs to be matched by a great reboot of telco services. In the last two sessions, Benji Yap and Cesar Romero put people back in the discussion by highlighting purpose and malasakit as their guiding principles. Our speaker today combines those perspectives by centering leadership on innovation and people. This is sorely needed in the Philippines, where Andres says innovation was left on the back burner until COVID-19 forced us all to adapt. Now, for companies big and small, and for government, innovation has to be front and center. By doing so, we can address the needs created by the pandemic while opening up technology opportunities for Filipinos. Let us give a warm welcome to Microsoft Philippines General Manager, Andres Ortola. Andres, to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Ritos. Thank you, Coco, for the welcome. I hope you guys can hear me and see me well. So first of all, it's great to be here. It's great to be here after all these leaders that spoke to us. I attended the conversations. They were really great lessons. So today I wanted to bring our perspective, what we learned, and I love what Mr. Ito said. It's with the vaccine on the way and the horizons looking a lot better. There's a lot of lessons learned that we probably need to rethink and think how we put into practice moving forward. So I brought a collection of things and learnings. I brought some slides with me just to make some points, but essentially I hope we can have a discussion and a conversation on these things. On a personal level, I've been in the Philippines. I landed here in July 2019. After you land and you look for a place, etc. I think I've been 3 or 4 months on the loose outside, and then Tal Volcano came in January, and then COVID, and then the rest is history. So I spent twice as much time or so in my house than I spent outside. So I can't wait to really go and enjoy the country. Every day goes, I connect more and more with the people in the culture here. Myself, being a Latin American, from a Spanish family, there's obvious connections everywhere I look. So I can't wait to hopefully meet you all at some point in time and spend some more time. So let me start with the vision of what we learned, and then first of all, a world today is not like the world in March or the world in February, March of this year. Yet there is a lot of uncertainty. Back then, we were asking ourselves whether, and ourselves and other partners and other companies, whether I should be in business, whether I should stop operation, what do I do, and rethinking about how do I react to this situation. Not that it's no longer the case, but so much has changed in many ways, and we have learned so much from other places in the world that I think we have a better view of how we move forward. And in our perspective, and Mr. Ito said it before, technology and innovation, who was not necessarily at top of the agenda, became part of the agenda, became the agenda for most of the people I speak to, and you can tell, I can see when a company truly puts innovation and technology at the top of their minds, you can tell, you can see how these companies recover, come back, are more resilient to a situation earlier. We've been operating with a model of resiliency that operates in three simple stages. We operated this way ourselves, but also we try to help our customers in a similar way. First and foremost, and very straightforward, how do you respond to the crisis? What's your response when situation is changing every day, when you don't have the information, how do you react? And what do you learn? In my early days in the crisis, for example, one of my biggest learnings was, where is the scope of what I'm looking at? A couple of examples that happened. First, you focus on your employees. You would say Microsoft is a digital company, so there's a lot of things that we can do remote. So our transition to remote was fairly straightforward. However, there were pieces of our business that were actually very brick and mortar oriented. For example, our resellers. We operated with a network of around 120, 130 resellers previous to the pandemic, previous to lockdown. And in the first 2-3 weeks, that number came down to 20. Simply because the rest could not operate remotely, could not transact business. So that was a big aha moment for me. Was that, okay, while I was taking care of our teams and make sure everybody was connected and productive, and even some processes had to be rethought, that part was out of my reach. And how do you respond when in the middle of a storm? That was a big learning for me. Second learning actually happened on the same topic, happened a few weeks back when we had the typhoon hitting Manila. When you operate remotely, power and internet connectivity are your lifeline. And for the first time since I'm in the company, 15 years this November, I've seen operations come into a complete halt when you cannot operate at all. So of course we reacted to that. That's something you cannot predict. We reacted by moving people, evacuating the people we had to. That's great. But then again, it came another realization of scope. We also operate in the Philippines, a big global service center, support center, operations, finance, many things. And that very day was the day that we introduced Xbox in the US. The day we launched Xbox product, that was the day the typhoon hit here. And all our support engineers were disconnected when that happened. So you can imagine the tragedy that was for the world. And while our Philippines business was under control, we had to deal with this new problem on how to help others be successful. And so my biggest learning is always keep looking and challenging your own assumptions on scope. What is the actual scope of what you're watching? The second phase, to continue with the logic, and arguably where most of us are, is recovery, trying to continue in business, to recover growth, to recover our activity previous to normal, to previous levels. And then last but not least, reimagining. That for many business here, I don't think any business is exempt to that, is how do I rethink, I reimagine my approach to market, to business, my processes, etc. So when I look back into our response days, there's one thing that I needed to do, one thing that I felt that was important, because my first realization is we need, as a company, yes, we had the means to play a bigger role, but I needed as a team to decide how we wanted to play, what do we want to do. And so we sat down with our leadership team, discussed for a couple of hours on what is it that we are going to do, how do we want to show up, what do we truly want to do. And the team was emerged from that discussion determined to become the digital first responders for the Philippines. That was a moment of truth for us, because that also meant not necessarily focus on business. This was a different mission. This was a mission to say we need to help the country when they need us. And it's easy to say, but then how do you actually do this? And so the pictures I chose here are actually pictures I like the most, and there's a story behind every picture. I'll touch on some later. What I like about these pictures is all these stories started after we make that phone call. What can I do for you? And it's a call that takes a lot of humility to make, because the truth is we didn't know. We didn't know what police or Supreme Court or VIR, what did they need? And even we were still figuring out ourselves, what do we need to do for ourselves? But that step was important. Show up with that humility to say, look, I don't know where this is going. I had customers, calls with customers with the questioning was actually two ways. So what do you see? Well, I see this, and what do you see? And so I think as leaders, or personally, having that humility call to say, I'm going to call my stakeholders and ask, what can we do together? That took a big step. And the step of deciding what role to play in this crisis, that was also a big moment for us. And so to be able to be digital first responders, the first thing I had to do was to get our house in order. I needed to have an operational company. So we as a company, this is not Philippines, but quickly moved to set up four key blocks that as a business leader, you need to make sure these four things are somehow in order for you to move. The first, health and safety. It goes without saying, big learnings, and I've heard it from my predecessors. Biggest learning is how do you really pivot on health and safety? How do you look at health? This is way beyond getting infected by COVID or not. It's how do you act on the mental, emotional? How do you create and renew those connections between teams and in your community? As a technology company, you can imagine we used to measure everything. We have data for everything. I can tell, how many customers are we putting by the day in such technology or so. This is something we couldn't measure. And we had to make peace with that dimension to say, well, we're going to do our best. We will try to listen to our people. And again, where is the border? What is the people I'm listening to? If I don't listen to my partners, they might have the same problems. I might be missing opportunities to help there. I might be missing opportunities to help my customers on the people well-being and things like that. So we did a lot of sharing on, hey, this is what's working for us. Also, we took ideas from our customers. This is working well for us in terms of engagement or in terms of community building and things like that. That was a big exercise. Support employee needs. Again, like I said before, yes, we cater for our employee needs, but my biggest learning is, yes, but if your partners are not ready to operate, you don't have a business. If your support center is not ready to operate, you don't have a business either. So that was another moment of learning and reflection for me. Serve our customers, definitely. I needed to make sure our setup was ready to serve our customers. Sometimes some customers required to actually have wet signatures in contracts. And I remember a rainy day when a messenger knocked on my door to sign a contract. It was raining. He couldn't get his motorbike, and he was bicycling all the way to the customer to get that paper signed. Big learning for us to say, how can we fix this? It's super important to make sure these things are not happening to us again. But again, learning after learning. And then, of course, one thing that we all globally at Microsoft and also here in the Philippines, we said we need to meet or exceed the government regulations. We can't be operating on a gray line on doing things on behind the government regulation. So with that, we came up with 5 stages on how we look at our own hybrid workplace. You can imagine we operate on more than 100 locations worldwide. So we needed some sort of a standard to say, what do we need to look at and depending on the country situation, move forward or backwards through this dial. Obviously, stage 1, the office was closed. Stage 2, we opened with some services and so on and so forth, which stage 5 would be completely open, back to normal. We're not ready for stage 4. We had to undertake a sort of, processes and analyze what was required for us to have the minimum safety or the safety needed to operate. But my also learning here as I go is I was looking at this in one direction only. Once I get to 4 or 5, I'm good. Unfortunately, we've seen it all around the world. Some customers at some offices and some Microsoft locations were at level 5 or was fully open. They had to come down. They have to come back up. Europe is happening. The US, the situation there. So also moment of realizations that you need to make sure you have a completely flexible setup that you can dial up or down as needed. And this will be the case for, hopefully not, but we prepare this for the next years to come. How do we operate in this environment, in this super dynamic dial? So that's for us. When it comes to customers, and I won't spend time here because I promised my team I won't do any sales pitch or whatsoever. But learnings from this, enabling teamwork. That was what the most demanded thing from our customers, teamwork. And I want to make a connection here and a point. Biggest learning for us has been that teamwork has been confused to have a person on a screen talking to me. And we learned that it takes a lot more than that. When you have a system that works, it's not straightforward because I'm seeing you when we have a conversation, or I see you 7x7, stuff like that. That is collaboration. We have companies, like in this case, Everise, for example, easy to move to Teams, easy to move to remote working, but then how do I look at my productivity? How do I look at customer engagement? These people are on the phone every day, and traditionally they had a supervisor walking behind them, making sure that we're on the phone with customers. How do we do this at home? How do we keep them motivated in a different way? So that's the part of collaboration and teamwork that we worked on. Employee well-being. I like this study because it's about police. You know, when lockdowns came, they needed to deploy people to hundreds of places, maybe thousands across Metro Manila on the checkpoints and controls. How do you manage that at scale, making sure your people is well taken care of, and you're not putting you're putting the right people at the right place. One of my favorites, I mentioned this before, Supreme Court. This is my best example of collaboration versus putting a person on screen. Supreme Court needed to change. Obviously, the system came to a halt. You can't get a hearing. It came to a halt. We enabled them to do virtual hearings. But again, the process underneath and the collaboration, you know, from an e-subpoena to having the documents shared and secured, to have the ability to transcript that session so it becomes legal. All those things came together. And I was recently talking to Chief Justice Diosdado. He was telling me that they doubt they will come back to the previous system before. They are a lot more productive this way. And I think until we spoke, maybe 2 weeks back or a month back, they released 60,000 people, 60,000 PDLs on virtual hearings. So people that could have been in jail just waiting for the process to start, the hearings to start, they're back home with their families. That's big value for us. And last but not least, another great example is how rethink how to reach your, I had in the slide, it had customers, but I had to, you know, when I think of DEPIT, nobody has a challenge of reaching 23 million customers or constituents or students in such a short period of time. Truth to be said, they were prepared. This is an example of DEPIT being prepared for this for quite some time. A lot of things to do and to continue doing, but they were already in some of our platforms. It was easy for them to scale up and to get that reach sort of refreshed. Now, when you move to the recovery phase, so arguably where we are, the economy here in the Philippines it's recovering. There's more opening. Hopefully, there won't be any second or third wave. We see 4 sort of key impacts, and you've seen it yourselves. Shift to remote work, not a secret. Digitization became no longer an optional. It's part of what we need to do right now. Virtual events like this one. I haven't attended a physical event since the lockdown, so probably same for you. But how do you really deliver value through those? And then remote developments for companies that needed to really come up with products. That was a big challenge. And with that, it comes new cost structures. In our case, we used to put a lot of money on travel and expense. Well, we have to put it somewhere else. And I guess the same for you. With that also comes new revenue streams, new delivery models, and all these only possible if you have the right infrastructure, the right technology foundation that allows you to move, excuse me, with certain level of assurance and visibility that you're making as a leader the right decision. And with that, so where are we moving? So what we see right now, it is a lot more complex than this, but if I were to maybe simplify, managing hybrid and remote workforce, like I said before, in a rapidly changing environment, my learning on the dial, up or down, it's not simply, okay, I'll give you a connectivity tool. As long as I can see you're fine. How can you manage the complexity? How can you run all your processes in a changing environment? Today, hopefully, we're going to move into stage 4 for Microsoft. Some companies are already operating physically or hybrid. How can you dial up and down? That is, to me, the trick. Digital selling, digital customer service it's a big item for many of our customers. Meralco has done a very good job as well in terms of moving to digital agents. They're also needed for them to rethink about the process at scale. JG Summit working with us on operating, optimizing cost, and when you run a business that is actually being hit by a lot of travel, hospitality, there's Cebu, Pacific, and retail stores and things like that, you need to optimize costs, and they were ready. They were ready from before. They were one of the companies that actually reacted the fastest to the new situation. And last but not least, business reliance and resilience when demand increased from PLDT. In the telcos, for the matter, they have seen a great increase in their demand, not only in the demand of products and services, but also demand of customer service, digital agent. Now you need to be more present than ever before. We're working with them on this, and they will continue. We will continue working with those. Now I'll touch on this, and I'm getting to the end. What do we see as trends shaping that new normal? And nothing of this is probably news to you, but this is my personal take on what I'm seeing. Disruption and protracted disruption that will come from others and from yourselves. If you think about the cases of taxi companies, transport grabs, and things like that, we have a case in Singapore, my previous market, where our taxi company, or their taxi company back then, quickly shifted and disrupted themselves, creating a delivery company, which uses the same taxis. People that couldn't transport, you don't move people, you move goods. That is how the company sort of quickly survived and disrupted themselves. This will happen. If you're not gonna be disrupted, you probably should be thinking, how do you disrupt yourself in the years to come? The question I started to ask myself more often than before is, what am I not seeing? What am I not paying attention now that I should? This is the mindset that I think personally we all should be. The second is very important, deglobalization. The world, I think we all learned the world is no longer flat, neither the workforce. We learned the lesson that supply chain is no longer global. It is going to continue being global, but the resiliency will force us to think about different circuits on a local basis and be smarter about how do you build more reliable supply chains. That will obviously push and require different levels of changing in the process, in the way that the things to achieve greater resiliency. And then concentration of companies might happen. I foresee a scenario right now that companies that actually done very well during the crisis will probably look at mergers and acquisitions. So that's going to be a part of the common ground in the years to come. More data, faster decisions. This is something that probably we all knew, but how do we as companies, as leaders, start to use more and more data to create and to expand into the new, I'm trying to refrain to say the new normal too much, but the truth is, whatever you sell, whether you're retail, whatever you sell or you do, you need to be able to deliver a multi-channel better than before. Being home, for example, one of those. You need to be able to do digital personalization. You need to be able to change that relationship. You have to be able to do this. And last but not least, and this is perhaps the most personal of all. You know, as a Latino in the Philippines, I need my hugs and my handshakes and all this, and I haven't been able to. I had to replace it for fist bumps and elbow bumps. But you look at the economy, let alone digital payments, which were there but now becoming super essential. But when you think about digital commerce, telemedicine and tele everything, teleservice, telesales, tele support, automation, those things are actually going to become essential to all of us, to all of us. And with that, I'm going to finish with this, because if I want to take maybe one message that I would encourage you to prioritize and ask yourselves today. None of this will be doable if we don't invest today or yesterday in the right skills. We will be stuck as an economy, as an industry, as a market, if we don't really invest on skills. So that I'm asking myself every day how aggressive I am on skilling my people and reskilling my people. And you would say, well, you guys have a lot of skills and technology. Yes, but what else do I need to skill them on? What else do they need to look at that we're not looking at? And I'll finish with this. Very personal. We had this mission before of empowering every person, organization on the planet to achieve more. Personally, it never felt that this real. It never felt that intense than it is today. And I hope, well, I gave you a glimpse of what we were doing these days. And I guess I'm happy to take some questions right now. Thanks a lot for listening. It's a pleasure to be here.
Andres, thanks very much for that fantastic talk. Before we go to questions that Roxanne, my colleague, will help me with, could I invite everybody to if you have any questions or comments, to type them into the chat box, and we'll get to them more or less in that order. Some questions had been sent in earlier, Andres, but I have a few questions of my own, actually. I wonder if we could go back. I'll ask my colleague Felix to go back to your dial, the 1 to 5 dial. Where is that? And could you explain again where you are between number 3 and Felix? Could you go to the dial that goes 1 to 5?
It's a few slides forward. So where are we right now?
Looks like the clock. Felix?
Yeah. Let me just try to do it myself quickly.
No.
This one, right, Coco?
No, it's the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the dial. Anyway, but you were.
Keep moving forward.
You were somewhere. Yeah, a little forward.
A little forward. So I think 1, 2 slides forward. So this is we have been working on getting onto stage 4. This one. So right now I am stage 4 ready. Stage 4 ready, meaning all the security protocols, all the cleaning protocols, everything is ready. But I have decided not to move. So right now I'm on stage 1. It's a decision that we made because of the numbers of the country, because of the situation, and because we're fairly operating now at full throttle without this. Now, interesting, you said, speaking about how dynamic is, one of the things that I had to do 2 weeks back is to allow people to move to the office, because some of them needed to go to the office because they didn't have any electricity or connectivity and they needed to work. I had to move it up to stage 3. Basically, that means internally means a call with security, some process, some people say, okay, guys, we need to move it to stage 3 for a couple of days, maybe a week. That will allow some people on a namely basis to come and work in the office. So that means activating security protocols, getting everything ready. So we move it to stage 3. Once everybody was safe and sound, we move it back to stage 1. I am personally targeting January to be when we definitely move to stage 4. Hopefully, of course, the vaccine prospects makes decisions easier and better. But we'll see. I'm hopeful to move into stage 4 and be able to, for example, welcome customers in our offices, which we have been for a long time.
Despite that, I see that forever, because it reaches to number 5, you're going to encourage employees to work from home. That's the mindset already, Andres?
We have been always a working from home company. So in fact, I haven't changed anything to work from home. But there's one thing that changed, and probably on the people side. The one thing I need to work the most, and perhaps, and apologies if I'm overreading on the Filipino culture, but I have seen people wanted to be seen in the office. So I want to go to the office because I want to be in the office. If I'm not in the office, it's not like a real job, things like that. So my battle right now will be, yes, stage 5. People will still be encouraged to work from home, but I need to battle on hey, if you're not don't need to be in the office, you don't have to be in there. Which that's the essential change. We had the working from home policy from before, but we honestly didn't pay attention. If someone wants to go to office, fine. Right now, we're going to be actually encouraging people to work from home as long as they want to. There is a lot of advantages and disadvantages, as you all know. Traffic in Manila is not a secret, so I think some people will take advantage, some people won't.
When it comes to disadvantages, a lot of our members, some of our members are telling me, while obviously it's great to be able to have all these meetings on demand. Well, I think they stopped saying it was very great after about 2 months. Then it became more of a challenge than something great. But what they're missing is the way one person put it. It's different when you're in a room across the table and you see people's faces and you see their reactions to your ideas. The concern or the fear is that we will lose some of the creativity and maybe dynamism if we are mostly work from home or very little work on site.
I couldn't agree more, and there's several components to that. So definitely, we don't intend to promote a working from home only scenario. That's how we started to talk about hybrid workplace. There are many moments that you would need a face-to-face brainstorming conversation, but there will be many other moments you don't need that. As long as you can manage both, and we as a company can manage that interaction, having an intense, collaboration when we need it, and moving to a less office dependent type of collaboration when it's not needed. That's the key. Now, one thing that you said, Coco, is actually true. One of the things that we had for the first time in our development teams is that there's been an obvious fatigue of working like this way, the way we work right now. And we have hired for the very first time, we have a team of psychologists and behavioral experts working with our product teams and trying to make sure we get our product more people friendly, if that is the case. One of the things, for example, we discovered is when you have probably, if we were all coming on screen right now, we have so many people on screen, our brains in the real world, if I have yourself and someone else sitting next to me, the common background, my brain doesn't need to process the background because it's the same. I don't need to spend time processing that. Versus today, I need to look at a completely different picture, one next to the other. That makes your brain think a little bit more and makes you more tired in the long run. We launched Together Mode, which simply is take all the images on screen, put them in a one common framework. Can be an auditorium, can be a library. I think we launched a couple more recently. So make sure at least reduce that fatigue of seeing people in different places. Things like that, little innovations that are coming. The other thing was the noise contamination. I think the most popular phrase this year has been, "Are you a mute?" or "You're a mute," or "Can you guys hear me?" But the need of muting yourself all the time also has to do with the noise around it. So getting our products smarter about determining what's important to be heard and what's not important to be heard. It's also something we have put into the product. Again, adding to this fatigue of trying to talk to you in a cleaner environment. Those are things that we're investing. So I think that the solution will be a hybrid when it's needed, or hybrid and personal when it's needed, but at the same time, getting our tools and smarter to make sure that digital experience is enriched and reaching more and more.
I have one more question before we go to questions from our members. But while I ask that question, I'd like to point out to some of the members that we posted a question in the chat box about where, and we'll hold this graph, this dial for a while, to ask the members where they are on that dial, and we'll go back to their answers in a while. So we have some answers here already ranging from stage 3 to stage 4. So I'd like to invite the other members to type in their answers there. My last comment before we go to questions from our members, Andres, is when we were designing this series, I was wondering, Microsoft being such a, as you started saying, being such a technologically based company, what kinds of problems you would face as a company. Obviously, you would help your customers, which you outlined there in those 2 slides. That is fantastic. What I guess escaped my mind was that you had all these resellers and these other problems that you had regarding the typhoon hitting you when Xbox was being introduced, which was obviously a real tragedy here. But to some people who bought or got their Xboxes that day, to some kids who got their Xboxes that day, that was a different kind of tragedy for them as well.
Yeah, and they wouldn't know what's happening. They actually, they're not supposed to know where our supports. They don't need to. So there's no expectation whatsoever. But when, for example, that comment on the deglobalization, our company now is thinking with reason, is look, should I have our support teams in different locations? Because if it so happens that we have a typhoon, maybe in the US, well, I can serve from the Philippines and vice versa. So it makes you think, well, everything has to be sort of rethought. And to tell you more of our learnings, tax filing still requires paper, invoices, payments. There's a lot of things that we need to go on paper, and we had to spend time digitizing those processes too in the Philippines. Like the anecdote of the guy on the bicycle, it so happens that the majority of our customers, and I've seen that changing, but initially our services contracts require wet signatures because there is a different set of liabilities. So typically a services contract is a thick piece of paper that you need to sign all pages and things like that. We were able to replace, I would say, 70-80% of those with digital signatures, but still we're not done. So still have some days, some wet signatures that have to go. Obviously, I'm determined to finish that and make it 100% digital, whether we go back to office or not. But yes, we were surprised by these things. I was surprised by some of these things.
Well. Last point. I'm a little surprised that you're indicating that you did not have the redundancy to handle that typhoon situation. Was that, you think? I mean, is that a correct? Did I get a correct impression from you? And if so, how big an oversight do you think that was, given the fact that we are hit by typhoons every year?
It is a great question, a question I ask myself since that day. The truth is, when you operate remotely, and my 100 and something employees don't have electricity at home and power, my realization was I have two new items in my supply chain, which is power and communications. Can I help them to become smarter, to predict these things? Perhaps. Can I do something else? Yes. Also, to be fair, our main location here in Makati was up and running way faster because of our redundancy circuits, was up and running much faster, and we were able to move some people to work from those places, from their homes to our location. It's very difficult right now to look at resiliency when you're looking at hundreds or thousands of people working from home. It's a tougher discussion. But yes, I'm thinking about it every day now.
I'm looking at the answers to the dial question 1 to 5. I see a lot of threes moving to 4, and something I guess a little bit similar. Head office stage 3, warehouse operations all open already. Yeah, so everyone's progressed at least to those stages. Before I turn over to Rox with some of our member questions, could I ask any of these members who answered this question whether they have a comment about their own experience moving to what we're now going to call stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 based on the Microsoft template? Do any of you have a comment regarding where you are? If you do, you can just speak up. And if there's none, anyone there? If there's none, I'm going to turn to Rox for the first questions. Rox?
One comment before that, just a short. And again, my learning, it doesn't matter where you are. What really matters is how fast can you move back up and down? Yeah. Coming a typhoon or coming anything else, or a wave 2 or wave 3, how fast can you, how much information do you have on reacting to a situation, moving for or different locations? I think that was it is still my concern. How fast can I move from one to another? Yeah. Last week in the typhoon, I had to move quickly, and it took me 2 days to move because it was a weekend. So I had to get the cleaning protocols reinstated, get people clean the office, things like that. Well, it took me 1 day and a half to get back to move to 2 stages. So important to know how fast you can go.
And it's both ways, right? You said you're ready for 4, but there could be times, and there have been times when you have to move backwards. And,
exactly.
And I think for that you have to move as quickly as in fact, maybe quicker than you.
Yeah, quicker. Yes, definitely. Quicker backwards than forwards. Well, no, in last week in the typhoon, I had to move to. I'm on 1. I had to move to 3 because I needed people to move. They had no power, electricity. I need to give them a location, so I had to do that very, very fast. Yeah. Like I said, it took me a day and a half to get the cleaning protocols enabled, get people over the weekend, re-infecting the office, blah blah blah. So it was. Can we do it faster? Maybe we don't need to do it faster, but I think it's also good to ask yourself that question.
Ken Benedicto says he's in stage 5. I just want to give him Ken Benedicto a chance if they'd like to comment on how and why they're at stage 5. Ken? If there's none, I'm going to turn over to Rox. Rox?
Yes, thanks, Coco. We have an interesting question from Mr. Samuel Tan. He's the country manager of Union Pay International. I'd like to invite Mr. Tan, if you can pose your question, please. Mr.
Hi,
Tan.
Sam. Go ahead, Sam.
Hi, Coco.
Hi.
Good morning, Mr. Ortola.
Hi, Samuel. How are you?
Hi. Similar to your company, a vast majority of companies here have shifted to remote work, and this trend will seem to continue well after 2020. However, working remotely intensifies the risk of data protection issues, as it can be hard for employees and the organizations to know when their personal or organizational data has been breached. Are there any best practices or precautions that your company have or will be undertaking to mitigate this kind of risk?
So thank you for the question, Samuel. In fact, I'm smiling because yesterday I was considering, I had some slides on security, but I thought it would be maybe too thick, and I decided to put them aside. But it's spot on. I think the question is it has many angles. Number one, I would start with skills, people skills. The majority of the people that we're working on our locations don't know how to operate in a digital world, yes. And they are the exposure points for cyber attacks. We have seen as a company worldwide, I can't recall the number, but I would say something around 100 to 200% increase on cyber attacks simply because the surface became a lot bigger. I have right now, say 120 people in office versus 120 people at home with Wi-Fi routers they don't control or somehow, etc., etc., etc. So
Yeah.
a lot of levels to think about. So first, skills, definitely. Second, obviously, security technologies that are integrated with your tool set, things that you do every day. It can be, at least our philosophy is that it can be that for you to work remotely, you need to have another different set of products and passwords, and you need to log on into 10 different things. That's unacceptable to us. It's been unacceptable before. It continues to be unacceptable. So it's a trade-off between security and efficiency and user experience, if you will. And last, data. And I think you touched on that. How do I look at my data governance, which is the term? It's no longer, well, where's my database? Well, it doesn't really matter. If you have a castle, if you have a castle before and your data was inside the castle, great. But now all your people is outside the castle and you need to keep your walls open. So it doesn't really matter. So those castles no longer work. So how do you build smarter data estate management, which is your data at rest, your data in transit, and all sort of those nuances? How do you control and secure those? How do you provide privacy? It's a big discussion. The technology is ready for that. Not Microsoft technology only. Technology is ready for that. It's typically when I engage in this conversation with some of our customers, the biggest gap, and Samuel, you've probably seen it yourself, it's the understanding of what the data estate management or governance includes. What is the board members? You guys are all members of a board. How many times have you discussed data with your boards? It's a question I ask, and 99% of the times I get, no, this is an IT discussion, and it's not an IT discussion. It's never an IT discussion. Data governance is a board discussion. So those are my three takes, maybe more, but those are my three takes. But very, very, very spot on. Security is a big challenge for everybody now.
Okay. Thank you for your answer and for that.
Mr. Tan, do you have a follow-up on that?
Sorry?
Mr. Tan, do you have a follow-up question on that response?
No. I'm fine. Thank you for the insights provided.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, I'd like to invite Mr. Carlos Baniqued. He's the managing partner of Baniqued and Bello Law Firm. He has a question, again, back to employees. Mr. Baniqued, may I invite you to please raise your question?
Yeah, Mr. Ortola. The question is, how do you monitor or evaluate productivity of employees under a work-from-home policy for extended period? Any suggestions?
Very complicated topic, very complicated. Also, I will be guilty if our productivity measures are not perhaps the productivity measures of others. Somehow connected to the point before is where is your, first of all, what are your productivity KPIs? So in my case, we don't track employee productivity as how many calls per day they do, things like that. I look at more lagging indicators of our pipeline, our business growth. Am I growing at the right pace? How am I growing this quarter versus a quarter without COVID? So I'm looking at this, but it's not a real time. Some other companies real time. Productivity, in my opinion, is a function of maybe two things. It's the tool set that you need. So your employees need to be as productive at home than they are in office. There's nothing they should not be able to do because they're home. So that includes, do they have the right equipment? Do they have the right connectivity? Do they have the right everything? That is part of our productivity setup. The second thing is, what are the data points that you, or for example, I look into my leaders, what are the data points and how I look at my information? We move from some time, not just now, but before, we move into a real estate reporting based on our technology, Power BI, etc. So I can tell by the day how our sales are going, how our marketing is going, how our service reports are going, and things like that. That gives me enough telemetry to continue running my business. In my personal case, or in Microsoft's case, that hasn't changed much between the COVID world and non-COVID world. It's an open topic for, I think, again, a combination of technology, yes, combination of processes, and more importantly, KPIs, and how instrumented your infrastructure is. Can you measure time on the phone? And if you can you get yourself as a leader, can you get that information real time to make decisions? That is probably the question. It's a difficult answer. On a people basis, that was on the technology maybe side of the equation. On the people basis, we have tried to keep with in many possible ways to keep the engagement high and the motivation high. The fact that we play a role in these highly visible customer situations like Supreme Court, police, armed force, and things like that, it gave some of our team the motivation to do better, to actually call more customers, to actually do more. And in fact, we had to deal sometimes with an excess of productivity less versus the effect of it. Again, maybe our particular case, but I think finding the right motivation levers and keep the teams engaged in the digital world. It is a challenge, even for us today. Big challenge.
Attorney Banique, could I ask you, in your case, what is the particular challenge about monitoring work and productivity for lawyers?
Well, yeah, because as you know, law firms bill on time basis.
So very different metric.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I guess for us, you will have to monitor like how much time is spent by each lawyer on a particular matter. So at the end of the day, we'll have to look at how much time has been incurred or has been spent, and on what tasks were your lawyers working on.
And I guess that was easier to do in an office, as Andres was saying. The manager would be walking behind you or around you, so the accountability would be their attorney, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you're in stage 3 of that dial. Does that go for all of your staff, or is there a difference between lawyers and staff, for example?
Well, it's different for the staff because the staff would have to be in the office physically because we have a lot of filings in courts. Mm-hmm. So the lawyers would be doing that. It would be mainly the staff who would be doing the filings in government agencies, courts, delivering documents, having affidavits signed by witnesses. So they're really out there in the field. But for lawyers, we can work from home. Or anywhere for the matter, yeah.
Yeah, all of that.
By the way, we're working on e-filings too. That'll come at some point in time, hopefully.
Okay,
Coco, may I invite Mr. Bon Moya? He shared some of his thoughts in the chat box about this topic. Mr. Moya?
No, I thought I was just sharing, but our problem is our laws pay on the basis of time, overtime, night differential, bonuses at the end of the year. And we are now in a situation where that is actually now not synchronous with how we measure productivity. And maybe perhaps a rethink of our compensation laws need to happen. There is a speed to finish negative bias against those who work faster in a time-based economy. Because those who finish faster in a work environment gets to get more jobs than those who do not. So in effect, in some cases you actually punish those who finish faster.
Yeah, and Bon, Andres Bon is your guy really dealing with the government, right?
In many ways. He's our national technology officer, but this is a very valid point. How much of the paradigm has to change? It's an interesting discussion.
Right. Roxanne?
Yeah, so we were talking about measuring productivity. This next question is really about motivation. So purpose-driven innovation is an important component, I suppose, in Microsoft's work. As teams work together online, do you see creativity being impacted? And how is Microsoft motivating and energizing its teams now collaborating remotely? And I'm asking this because Microsoft has been doing this for a long time, while some companies are still now getting into the groove of online work. Maybe you could share some of your motivation or how you energize teams.
Very good question. Very excellent question. So I think it so far it's been a great experience for us. Somehow the digital world offers the possibility for people to engage maybe more. Give you an example. I don't know. We have in the chat right now, we have maybe 20, 40, 50 questions. I don't know. But when I do meetings for my team and for the bigger team, we have hundreds of comments, questions, likes, etc. Hundreds, to the point that it's too much to handle. But that engagement actually sort of replace or even enhance the engagement I probably could have had if I was speaking to them physically. So in a way, we welcome that. We welcome that. We're thinking now, okay, how do I keep on this high intensity engagement when I come back to the physical world? That is super important. So in a way, there is goodness on this digital. There is real goodness. The downside is the ability to focus and pay and direct your attention to one thing versus multitasking and many things is something human beings are still challenged with. But then to the point of the motivation, look at we launched it slightly before COVID, but we have a program at Microsoft called Para sa Bayan. And we've been doing a lot of work on building the right coalitions, stimulating transformation, etc. But some of those pillars have been really pushed by the people coming themselves with, hey, I don't know what we can make out of this situation, but I think there is an opportunity for us here. And that motivation came from that purpose-driven innovation. Said, I want to help the country. And when we set that distinction being us, the digital first responders. So for example, we enabled thousands of users with free collaboration technologies, free. So for months, we didn't make a peso out of this, nothing. But we never asked that question. We never did. Eventually, some of these customers ended up transforming and then ended up actually upgrading themselves into different things. But eventually, they ended up recognizing the need for it. But back to my earlier point, that motivation came from the people and from us making clear that our mission during this time was going to be to help the country. Para sa Bayan became a lot more alive and had a deeper meaning for everybody. I had questions from how can we help a team of 5 people building PPE suits to how can we help on to contact tracing and testing? How can we help? The questions were actually so many that came from the people that we had to manage it. So I think in that sense, I think we got that one sort of right. I think we put ourselves in that position of everything is possible. Bring your ideas and we'll see what we can do with it. It took a little bit of an effort initially to sort of detach business performance from that, but I think eventually it paid off. It paid off big time, and our business even grew in cases where we were expecting not to grow. It actually grew faster. So I think that played a big role. Motivation, the purpose that we set ourselves to, and innovation following that purpose was a key for us.
So alongside Para sa Bayan, I guess parallel to that was the digital first thrust of your response, right? And I guess that's closer to the innovation side.
Yes, and it's not easy. When you're a technology company, it's like when you if you sell something else, you want to solve everything if you sell hammers, you want to solve everything with hammers. But in our case, we had to sometimes convince some of the customers that technology is the solution for you. Now, what made this situation special is, look, here's the technology for you. We'll talk about how much it is later. And we didn't use, we were super careful of being perceived as we were using, and your comment and trust, Coco, is spot on. A clear message to the team is we're not going to use this situation to seed our products and solutions, to sell more. We can't do that, because if we do that, you can never come back from that situation. You can never come back. So we're open and transparent to our customers. This is what you can do. This is how much it would cost eventually. You can shut it down eventually if you want to. This is the situation. I think operating with transparency has been, for us, the one key success factor.
The other virtue you mentioned, aside from transparency, is humility. And I liked how you described how when you meet with customers now, it's a two-way question.
I tell some of my customers, look, I don't have all the answers, but we can rest assured we're going to ask ourselves the right questions. And that's the philosophy I've been following. So if you ask yourself the right question today, between leaders, goodness emerges.
How big a change is that? How much of that change happened during COVID, or how much was that was already baked into either your style or IBM style? Microsoft style.
It's been always baked. It's been always baked there, but COVID made it explicit and made it, exposed the need of us. And again, I was asked questions when the pandemic started. How do you see the market evolving? Like, the truth is, I don't know. I do not know. Perhaps I could have tried to give a vision. The truth is, look, I do not know. This is what I know. And between what I know and what you know, maybe we get a little better understanding. But having that sense of humility, I think it also creates that trust that I was referring to before. So look, I'm here to try to build something. Most of the things we built were new. Like, also telling my customers, if I come to tell you something someone else did, that is probably late for both. It's probably late for both. So we should be now ideating and maybe doing things that nobody has done, because of the situation in the country was extreme, because we had to do it, because we needed to come up with new solutions. And when you have those conversations, I think, and I genuinely think, one thing I truly value about the Filipino built-in resiliency is that it comes with a big deal of creativity. When perhaps because of the country's many difficulties in the past and in the present, that creativity sparks a lot of ideation. You put these two things together, and it's a great opportunity.
You went over, I think there's 8 companies that 8 customers that you help, both government and private sector.
Yes.
And you touched on them, touched on each of them lightly. Could you tell us, and it may have sprung from these two-way conversations you had with your customers, which of those, could you elaborate on one of those that for you really stands out as something you will hold up for the foreseeable future as an example of how you performed this year?
Well, I have to mention this one, Supreme Court. It's absolutely close to my heart. And I'll tell you what, one very personal thing, Coco. When you work in technology, very seldom I come to tell my kids, this is what I did today. Now, when I tell my kids, we helped release 60,000 dads and moms and people that are supposed to be home, that day, the mission becomes extremely real and personal. The mission becomes extremely real. And seeing not only the change in the people, seeing that the goodness that is brought, not just to them, also to the people working in the judiciary system. It not only feels, and by the way, initially we didn't make a peso out of that thing, just, but when you see that, life-changing opportunities, there's no way that doesn't get close to your heart. I'll hold that one close to my heart for the many years to come, for sure. for sure.
MBC is part of an organization called the Judicial Reform Initiative. And so we were watching that happen. And we're quite impressed at how quickly, you know, you've been in the Philippines 15 months or so. I don't know if you think things here work much faster, much slower than they do in Latin America or elsewhere. But when that idea first came up to release the persons under temporary detention, we were not hopeful it would happen. And then watching it happen quickly by Philippine standards and quickly by any standards was quite impressive. Could I ask you, when you did tell your children about that, were they impressed?
Very much. Because I don't get very much. And when things become real, and when you sell technology, I mean, you cannot touch it, right? I can't bring stuff that I built home. But they were impressed because the comment, that's my wife's comment. It looks like you have a soul as a company. And again, we're not an NGO, right? So we're here to the business. We're a commercial company, but when you put a mission like this behind you, things get a lot more meaningful for everybody. I think that summarizes the mission. And we did also great other things. You know, you asked me my second favorite. My second favorite is when we hosted virtual graduations for school children. A very important moment in life, which is like graduation, that was taken away from thousands and thousands of children this year. So in schools in the middle of nowhere, they don't know how to do this thing. Big schools in Manila, maybe, yes. When I attended some of these guys and I saw the kids attending the virtual graduation from places you could see, allow me just to say, huts in the jungle, and you could see them in the uniforms with their parents, give them their certificates. I couldn't hold it, become super emotional, and then show it to my children. Like, these kids have managed to go through this important moment in life, thanks to the work of this many people that have done. So I found more meaning in these things than anything else. Very personal point.
You never thought you would be reporting those kinds of things in your KPI, did you?
No.
Rox, you have a question?
Yeah, Coco, we have a follow-up about the Supreme Court project. I'd like to invite Mr. Carlo at Attorney Banicad again to please ask your follow-up question.
Mentioned earlier about your work with the Supreme Court, and you're very happy about it. I was just wondering whether you've been invited to replicate that same thing to the BIR. You know, the revenue officers continue to refuse to meet virtually. So I was just wondering whether, that effort could be transported to the BIR as well.
Attorney Banicad, we don't know why they don't want to meet virtually, right?
Oh, well, we don't know either. We can certainly discuss a number of things virtually.
I'll give you, I don't know how to answer a question, and maybe hundreds of ways to answer it. Innovation, that mindset has to come from within. I was very impressed with the leadership and the growth mindset that Chief Justice Diosdado exhibited when he spoke to us about this, because it's not just the hearings, it's the e-subpoena, it's other things that we're not done, it's not perfect, but it's been done fast, and that took the determination of one leader to say this has to happen to make it happen. So it will come back to those. You could ask me the same question for many other institutions, right? The answer is I don't know. What I can tell you is we're working hard to show them what's possible. We're working really hard to show them what's possible with technology. Let alone again the technology selling part. I'm a citizen here too, so I also suffer when I have to do things, and I can't stand when I go to a mall and I have to fill up my details on papers. And God forbid that they need to look at this paper somewhere, because it's insane. So I feel it as a citizen too, and believe me, every time I go do something, I'll get all my team activated try to. Again, I think it will come out of the growth mindset and the future mindset of our leaders. I hope they have seen. I hope they've seen how some companies are, and I would say the private sector, in a sense, has actually fast forward as well. I think I hope that the ecosystem itself, private and public, will be racing to that. I'm just hopeful this continues, right? We don't lose momentum because COVID seems to be fixed, which isn't the case.
Andres and Attorney Benicat, what Andres said, that what's crucial here is that the mindset has come from within is so true. Unfortunately, Chief Justice Peralta has announced that he's retiring early, so hopefully the successor will have a similar mindset. But I don't think it'll be a surprise, Attorney Benicat, to tell you that that's been a challenge with the BIR. We actually have a project that has to do with e-payments and e-invoicing, to try to move both of those forward or advance both of those. We've told our members something about that, and we'll be telling you more about those. And if you're particularly interested in that, please reach out, and we will involve you in that.
Sure, Coco. Thank you.
Thanks, Attorney. Rox, I think it's an appropriate segue to your COVID question.
Yeah, thanks, Coco. So there's a lot of talk about COVID vaccine and the possible role of business sector in distribution. Are you already thinking about this, maybe an initial game plan? Or if not, do you have reservations?
So the question is, how are we going to manage the vaccine distribution and management moving forward?
Yes. Because right now the government is initially appealing already to companies to help out on the distribution.
Yes. Yeah. So there is a lot of initiatives around that. I think that is probably going to be a good solution for the Philippines itself. I think the challenge that I personally see and that we're working on is, how are you going to manage this? Because it's not easy to say. I was so happened that I have some relationships in the pharma industry as well. They're telling me, look, if we go and say we're going to distribute vaccination people over 65, fair enough. It's not the same a 65-year-old person living in downtown Manila or Makati, let's say, that a person living alone up in the mountain that there's no COVID or whatsoever. So how does the government or the private companies put the resources where it's needed? That to me is a challenge. We are working with some companies to provide data-driven solutions where it gives you the ability to say, well, let's go for 65-year-olds. Where in the city, where in the place are the vectors that we should be attacking first? A 30-year-old jeepney driver is a lot more dangerous and a lot more, dangerous the word, than go vaccinate all the 65-year-olds living outside in the countryside. That intelligence is what's not baked in the system. That's my concern. We're working on that. This is going to take years. We know that the vaccine production, this is not like mixing, chemicals. It's a complex process. It's a complex transportation process. And distribution will also be a complex process. So we're working on that. We hope that this is not about just getting the vaccine in market. It's about how smart are we on getting the vaccine in market. Otherwise, we have a couple of years now to figure out how do we get our people vaccinated.
I'll take this opportunity, Ross, to say that we've been involved in some of these meetings with the government regarding how to acquiring the vaccines, while difficult, is a kind of a simple problem. It's just a question of putting the order and being in the queue. The real problem is getting it here and then distributing it to everyone, including the person up in the mountain that Andres referred to. And it's amazing how complex that is. In fact, tomorrow we'll be sending out a survey to our members. It comes from a group called T3, which is the public-private group that is working on now working on vaccine distribution, asking all our members as well, the other associations are doing it as well, which of about a dozen areas they might be willing to help in. And then put that into a database and figure out who can help at what point. One of the parts, Andres, I'm not sure if you've been attending these meetings already, is just a database of who's gotten the vaccine, which vaccine it was, because you can't get dose 1 of brand X,
different one.
dose 2, and yeah, you can imagine how difficult that
the problems when you look at the problems is a lot more than that. So supply chain is a big part of the problem. Some things I'm learning. Supply chain is a big part of the problem. Let alone the cold. The cold. That's one thing. How do you trust? They're not counterfeits. So it can be counterfeits. What if you get injected something that is not actually the vaccine? So and unfortunately, there is no way for the Philippines to do this. We are not Japan, we're not US. You can buy 70 million doses and forget about everything. You got to be smart. The objective of vaccination is try to reach herd immunity as fast as possible. And that might mean go to Quezon City and get everybody vaccinated. But if it's data driven, if you stop the big locations, then maybe more effective and smarter than actually go through the standard, kids or old people things. So my point is, in the Philippines, we have no choice but to get smarter because there won't be enough vaccines available, and let alone the controls. And Coco, you're right, let alone the logistic around it.
My last question, but don't answer it yet, will be when you look towards next year, what can our friends here with us today do to be more prepared for next year, and or what should they be prepared for when they look at the possible risks that could happen next year? Don't answer that yet. Before Andres answers that, could I ask everybody here to please share your comments and feedback on today's session via Microsoft Forms. You can see that on your screen right now, or some of you can go to the chat box and click on that link that my colleagues are sharing for your comments and suggestions regarding today's session and future activities we might have. Please note that we may use your comments in our publications. And with that, I'm going to ask and address that last question, which is when you look towards the next 1 or 2 years, particularly, like you said, this COVID situation is going to be around at least that long, I think. What should people be ready and prepared for, and or what can they do to be prepared for the inevitable, or sorry, the unpredictable?
Well, I wouldn't start with make sure your technology supports, it's flexible enough to give you that resiliency. So I mean that's probably obvious from the hammer seller to talk about hammers. I would say yes. So just make this conversation a board conversation. Start with that. I still hear, and believe me, it's not because I still hear, oh, this conversation will be my CIO will take care of this. It's no longer, it is no longer the case. If you're not looking into this, you're looking into the past. It's going to be very rough in the future. Connected to this growth mindset, we now, I think probably more than ever before, as leaders, going to be challenged with that growth mindset, meaning, can I look at my competitors as partners today or part of my supply chain? Can I change my business model to take advantage of that? Can I look at other technology trends, disruption? Am I smart enough on this? All that needs to be in our heads, regardless of the business you are in, regardless. And last but not least, skills, skills, skills. You're going to be as fast and as good and as flexible as your workforce is. And if you can't we talk about tech intensity at Microsoft. Tech intensity has the ability of creating new software or technology solutions, or the ability to assimilate them. If your company is not skilled, you're going to be as lowest of the pack. And that's no longer an option. So skills, it's the name of the game. And if we can help little advertising, give me a call because we have a lot of investments on that side. So do give me a call. Like I said, I might not have the answers, but I'll have the right questions for us.
Thank you very much, Andres, for this fantastic session we had today. On that note, thank you to you and to Microsoft, also Ethos Cruz for doing the welcome remarks this morning. Thank you to all the members who joined us today, and we really appreciate your presence with us today. Our next speaker for the last session in this series will be Josephine Gutiano-Yap, President and CEO of the Philinvest Group. Georgie has been very much involved in all of these public-private partnerships with the government to address the COVID situation. She'll have a lot to tell us both about how her companies handle it and about these public and public-private initiatives that have been going on since March. That's going to be Jan 6, 2021, so 2 days after we come back to work. We'll remind you of that over the holidays. That I promise that will be the only reminder we'll send you over the holidays. If you haven't registered yet, please mark your calendars and save the date. Good day to everybody. We look forward to seeing you again next year for our last session. On behalf of my, apparently here are my MBC colleagues. I did not know this was going to come up. We look for, on behalf of my colleagues, have a restful and meaningful Christmas and have a better new year. We hope to see you again soon, hopefully in person. Andres, thank you very much to you and your team for this.
Thank you for having us. It's a real pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Everybody that's here with us today, thank you very much. If we don't talk to you again before the holidays, please have a blessed holiday season. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all. Andres.
Felix? Okay.